Um, all right, everyone, type exclamation point in the chat to read verse 60, 61, and 62. Evanique, Margarita, followed by David.
Okay. Chapter 60, governing a large nation. Govern a large nation as you would cook a small fish. Do not overdo it. When Tao prevails over the world, the ghosts lose their spiritual powers. Not only do the ghosts lose their spiritual powers, but even the spirits also do not harm people. Not only do the spirits do not harm people, even the sage does not harm people either, because neither invisible power nor visible power harm the virtue. Harm the virtue returns to the world. I think I read that wrong.
So Margarita for number 61.
Okay. Chapter 61, Staying Low. A large nation should be like a river delta, which the world converges on. It's like the female of the world. The female invariably overcomes the male by quiescence and staying low. Therefore, a large nation can stay low to the small nations, together the small nations. A small nation can stay low to the large nations to join with the large nation. So staying low is to gather together or to join with. The large nation only wants to provide for more people. The small nation only wants to partner with other people. In this way, both can get what they want. Better for the larger to stay low.
Thank you, Margarita. And next up we have David, number 62.
Chapter 62, the Sanctuary Tao. Tao is the sanctuary of all things. It is a jewel for people of good quality. It is a refuge for people of ill quality. Moral words can gain respect. Moral deeds can win admiration. Why are the people of ill quality abandoned? The titles of emperor and chief ministers are created for this reason. Instead of using discs of jade or carts of 4 horses, they would do better just resting and advocating the Tao. Why was this Tao valued in ancient times? Is it not because it gives what you have asked for and forgives what you have wronged? So it is valued by the entire kingdom.
Thank you, David. Now, please type exclamation point in the chat if you have any comments on verses 60, 61, or 62. Madeline, thank you.
Here we go. Okay, let's see. Well, I remember, this is great because I remember the discussions of these. I love the imagery of cooking a small fish, the discussion of cooking a small fish, what it's like when you're frying it and you try to flip it over. It's better not to mess around with it. And this really goes quite well with the one about the large nation lying low. That the smaller nations will be attracted to it. In other words, don't keep messing around with something that's working. Just let it keep working, and then let others be drawn to that.
Excellent comments, Madeline. Does anybody else wish to comment on verses 60, 61, or 62? I too remember these conversations. Okay, go ahead, Margarita.
For 61, I also remember this is, we discussed something about a concept of family here is displayed in this chapter, where like the big country should be like the mother for small countries. That's why it needs to stay low as the feminine trait. And with 63, if we may go to 63, I remember we also talked 63. Have we gone to 63? No, only 62.
Oh, 60. Yeah, we're only 62.
I thought we already, yeah. Maybe that's all for now. Thank you.
Yes. I remember conversations about 60 and 61 as well, and then very much along the same lines as Madeline, where it was the idea of Wu Wei, where we're not interfering as a leader for number 60, and cooking the small fish, and that is the famous one that was used by Ronald Reagan, for anyone that doesn't remember. And then 61 was the idea of nations actually working in harmony with one another as opposed to conquering one another, which is actually a very important thing at that particular moment in time. It was, since there were so many warring states. And again, it does go nicely, as Madeline had already mentioned, with verse 60. The fact that large nations and small nations actually could work together is, as opposed to warring with one another, is a way of following nature. So that was one of the, and yes, you saw a lot more yin instead of yang in that particular verse. So those are my comments, just really briefly. So Jason, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I think these three all political writing, right? And of course, everybody know number 60 is I keep the do not overdo it. That's Ronald Reagan's interpretation. So I think that's great to keep it. So 60 and 61, and also tell the, and I think the warning is also on the a large nation, as the large nation to stay low, because you already have a lot of advantage already. And number 62 basics are also very political, talk about how to rule a state, and basic is talking about the title of, instead of using disc of jade and the cut of 4 horses, this one is talking about rituals, okay? Because at that time, the emperor, the role of emperor and the chief minister is ritual, okay? It's an important part. So here is teaching not focus much on the rituals, okay, but more on advocating the Dao. And when you're doing Dao, people will follow automatically. So basics, that's the teaching on these 3. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So next we'll be reading verses 63, 64, and 65. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to read those verses. Evanique, thank you. Margarita, followed by David again. Thank you all 3 of you for your courage.
Chapter 63. Oh, you're welcome, Joe, by the way.
No problem.
Chapter 63, without difficulties. Practice Wu Wei actions. Manage non-interfering business. Taste the tasteless food. Act without, sorry.
No, this part is Armand's translation. So I just try to keep both, you know.
Oh, okay. Act without actions. work without working, flavor without tasting, regardless of what is large, small, many or few, settle the complaints with virtue, plan difficult tasks while they are easy, achieve great tasks from what was once small. The difficult tasks in the world surely begin from the easy ones. The great tasks in the world surely begin from the small ones. Therefore, the sage never strives for what is great, but he can accomplish great tasks. Promising lightly surely leads to little commitment. Treating many things are easy is sure to lead to many difficulties. For this reason, the sage treats things as difficult. Therefore, he never has any difficulties.
Thank you, Ebony. Next up, we have Margarita.
Yes. Chapter 64, Assistance to All Things. It is easy to maintain when the situation is stable. It is easy to plan when the symptoms is unforetold. It is easy to break when things are brittle. It is easy to scatter when particles are light. Start to act when it has not yet begun. Start to fix when it has not yet become chaotic. A giant tree of full span girth grows from a tiny sprout. A tall terrace of 9 stories is built from a shovel of dirt. A long journey of 1,000 miles begins from a single footstep. Those who act forcefully will fail. Those who hold tightly will lose. For this reason, the sage acts with wu wei, so he never fails. He doesn't hold too tightly, so he never loses. People, when handling affairs, often fail at the stage of near completion. They should be as prudent as as at the beginning, so they can have no failures. For this reason, the sage desires not to desire, so he never values expensive goods. He studies what is not studied, so he can restore what people have missed. To assist all things in their own ways, he dares not to interfere.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up, we have David.
Chapter 65, Profound Virtue. In ancient times, those who were good at Tao didn't try to enlighten the people. They tried to keep them from knowing. It is difficult to rule people when they know too much. Therefore, the ruler who governs the state with knowledge is like the thief of the state. The ruler who governs the state without knowledge is a blessing of the state. To know those two is to also know the criterion of ruling. Always knowing this criterion is called profound virtue. The profound virtue is deep and far-reaching. Everything returns to its root. Only then does everything accord smoothly.
Thank you, everyone, for your reading. Now please type exclamation point in the chat to comment on verses 63, 64, and 65. Ebony, followed by Margarita, followed by Madeline.
Yeah, I think with all these 3 chapters, they focus on Wu Wei, which is like action within action. But I think what I got from it is that to focus on the small things. And I think that's just true. And I remember we discussed this before, but I remember it's so true that you focus on the small things and then you can build up to the more difficult things. And if there's a difficult task, you break it down, or like a big project or whatever it is. If it seems too large to handle, look at what you can handle and then build on that instead of looking at the whole thing. Break it down into small tasks that are manageable. And I think that's key. If you focus on what's manageable, then it will eventually you'll be focusing on the whole thing and you'll get the task done.
Excellent points. problems start out as small problems, you know, and that's a good way of looking at it, is that, but if you solve them, you know, if you take everything seriously and you're conscientious when you approach things, I think that that's a very, very important personality trait to have. And I think that's a very wise action. Go ahead. Next up, we have Margarita, I believe.
Yes. With chapter 63, this is also one of my important lessons, because Wu Wei is not just about not doing, but about knowing when to do, what to do, and not to do that overwhelmingly, not too much. Because we also have our limitation as human. Sometimes if you do things, actually perhaps we ruin things. So it's better to keep it simple, but not to underestimate it. It is more about how to simplify things when things still small, when things still can be planned. Yeah. So Wu Wei is not about merely inaction, but knowing what to do. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, which is actually the definition of wisdom, and essentially, you know, it's having knowledge but knowing when to apply it. So very good. Madeline.
Let's see. Well, these are the ones that remind me of the Ooda Loop.
Okay.
For those who aren't familiar with the Ooda Loop, it's observe, orient, decide, and act. And it was developed by John Boyd and then later further developed by a couple of his colleagues as a way to think when you are in the cockpit of a fighter plane. And so it's the constant reiteration of gathering impressions from the environment, orienting yourself to them, making decisions, acting. And so it continues on and on. One of the things that he talked about that I liked a lot was that all of the work that goes into that first, all of the practice of the fighter pilot, all of those hours and hours and hours of training, and even before that, there's the whole military infrastructure that goes into designing the planes, building the airfields, all of those things that leads up to that glorious moment that we think of as like, ooh, the fighter pilot did this. But there's actually a lot more going on first. And so I think that these are really, especially the one that's up on the screen right now, it's easier to do all these things at the beginning. When you have the stable situation on the ground, when you're able to train the pilots, when you can address problems when they're first beginning. In other words, when the particles are light before they've all accumulated, just like, I don't know, shoveling your walkway when it's snowing. It's easier to do it, you know, every hour or two than to wait until you've got 5 feet out there. So it talks about that. And then also it talks at the end about once you get near the end, don't just say like, okay, I've already done all this work. Now I think it'll all just fall into place. You know, you have to stay on top of the details, but at the same time to realize, yeah, if the initial plan was good, maybe I'll just stick with that unless there's really something that suggests itself otherwise. And I think that is also part of Wu Wei, which is kind of not overdoing it, not fussing around with that little fish in the frying pan, not messing around with that oak tree that's been planted and say, oh, I think I'll move it over to this other mountain slope. Yeah, it's doing pretty well here. It might do better over there. You know, you've got the seed, it's in a good place, just let it grow. And if you need to prune the tree or adjust it or something, you can do that. But better to start off with a good beginning and know where to site the tree.
Excellent comments. Really, I really liked the OODA loop analogy. The idea that you're paying attention to all the small things when while you're training or getting ready for actual combat, and that ultimately those things are what matter when you're engaged in a very high stress situation. It's all the little things that matter, I think, even when it comes to when you're dealing with people. I think you can tell a lot more about how they pay attention to the details and how conscientious they are about things versus the idea that they're doing something grand or have grand visions or things along those lines, that they actually they focus on the little things. So that military, the OODA loop analogy was fantastic. Next up, we have my good friend Jenny.
I feel badly about doing this, but I keep thinking about, was it the 62 that was talking about how a
Knowledge.
large state should be kind to a smaller state and work with, I'm not sure exact phrasing of those sentences, but I keep thinking about if that were really true in real life right now. I mean, thinking of what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, and I'm thinking, when will this world would work the way of the Dao teaching? I'm dreaming, wondering. Sorry for going backwards like that, but I just been.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It brings a level of practicality to the verses. And so no need to apologize. I completely agree with you. It was, and apparently you seem to have a lot of people that agree with you as well in the chat. So no, thank you for bringing that up, Jenny. I think that is a profound example of how the Tao is still relevant today and how it can be meaningful to world leaders today. So I believe I have Kevin, then Curtis.
Thank you, Joe. I continue, Jane. Actually, it's chapter 61. It's yeah, 61.
We're going backwards.
Yeah, you know, just continue. That's yeah. I think the good about it, Dao De Jing, is about it's give a different view. If you look on the top, value beauty, or look at something not beauty, let's give a different perspective and viewpoint. Here's like we normally we value those personal influence or big country or powerful superpower. Here's if we superpower, you stay on the low. The last one, it's right. The last sentence, 大则易为下. Better for the larger to stay low. If you, Joe, is you big guy, I'm a teeny guy, you still, don't use your full power strength me, right? So that's the basic point. For this verse 63, 63, we talk about Wu, Wei. What's Wei Wu Wei? The first, if you can notice that's Wei Wu Wei, that's the first. We talk what's Wu Wei? Wu is practice Wu Wei, and if based amount has act without action. What's that mean? We really need to understand. We talk Wu Wei, doesn't mean you don't do anything. We doing something. We don't interpret. If like Madeline, good interpretations. If something work nice, later keep going. Don't interfere. And also this chapter, one is 是以圣人终不为大，故能成其大。Therefore, part, right? If Jason, you can point that highlight. Therefore, the sage never strives for what is great, but it can accomplish great task. So that's something very dialectic thinking. I'm not pursue the big, however, achieve the big. That's how beautiful. Sometimes we try strived. I'm super. No, I still keep a super. It's like, I don't want to anybody catch me up. I'm going to kick them away. So here's like, if another way I look around, okay, I'm going to humble to everyone. Yeah, the people like me, not because I have power, because they respect me, because my culture. That's a underline for me, right? If I as a foreigner, understand American culture, value, you see from every industry, every aspect, a superpower, from the food industry to the Hollywood, and the new technology everywhere that people admire. However, if you finger point, you should doing this. Listen to me. Listen, people they change the tone. Just that's my take. For next chapter 64, one I want to mention called 千里之行，始于足下. That's a long journey of 70 miles, begin from a single footstep. So this is beautiful from traditionally practice. However, now I feel a little bit the change in tone, especially internet, AI, people get shortcut, and it works. So if you think of a traditional industry, from a farmer to a truck driver to the innovator, high to, especially after pandemic, hard to find a good guy, or even people willing to work for those kind of hard job. For the 65, I guess. Oh, 65, we don't start yet, right? Did we?
Yeah, we did. We
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
We
yes,
did.
yeah.
One is the 名字来自气质多. It's hard to rule people when you know the knowledge. No, let's do this. Know too much. So this here very interesting. If we keep value those who is smarter, who is make trick, who can make there's a trick thing. Yes, that's competition going to rise. And yeah, this is a little bit compare what we practice. For example, stock, like that's the kind of trick I would say compared to. Yeah, overall, I would say Dao De Jing give us a different view of how they look at the world. Thank you.
Great comments, Kevin. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you commenting on number 65, because I think that has a lot of different interpretations on how that can be looked at. I have one version that I had looked at, I didn't have notes with Jason, but that it had to do with the ability to say, I don't know. And there's a certain humility and lack of pride that actually goes into this. I didn't necessarily see that. That was a completely different translation. I don't see it in this translation, but 65 was a challenge for me, I remember. So next up we have, I believe, Curtis, followed by Margarita.
It's just so amazing that you guys has a strong interest in Chinese Dao, and frankly I'm not that big fan of that, but I do have some my thinking about it, and you see that Dao is back to like 1,000 years ago, and it's more like Chinese type to centralize a lot of things, and based on their daily life and how to run the country, even small communities as well. And my question is that how does this what's the practicability at this current world? And I'm not particularly talking about how people manage themselves, and in terms of human being, And I think that the majority of the nature of the human being is still quite similar as our ancient, our ancestors. However, and because of the environment has a big time change, and there should be something different, and we probably should have certain kind of different perception of those wisdom and those philosophies, and trying to make a new explanations. And if you look at a lot of the philosophies in Chinese, and it's just so well-rounded, and which means, and basically you have no way to attack from a certain point because it's just so well-rounded. And but for the how for the issue how to run the country, and particularly like how to manage the relationship between the countries. And I think that Chinese the way that Chinese doing, and it's not like what we really want to achieve. And because as an individual person, we always wish our individual country be so powerful, and we should be proud of our country. But look at our history back to like starting from 300 years ago, and the Chinese nation is in a deep trouble. And I think it could be attributed to certain part. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, we're trying to keep it to comments on the passages. I'll just briefly comment on what you said. I still think that there are universal principles that we can extract from the Tao. I think I would argue that we actually have to return to nature and understand nature as a way of actually bringing back a certain degree of social harmony. And there are a lot of indications that China currently is doing that. For me personally, there's been a lot of wisdom that has come from here for me, in the sense of, the idea of inaction, the value of inaction, knowing when to act, as well as, there are principles like not needing to necessarily see the world to gain wisdom, and what that actually means. So what actually knowledge means. So I think that they're understanding the natural thing, and then also understanding the importance of the feminine. And I think that's also a very important part of the Tao as well. That I think is defined, is something that's lost in the current culture, actually, and very much so throughout the world. So there's a balance between yin and yang, that it's not either or. So I think that there's quite a bit that you can glean from the Tao, but I want to come back to, I want to keep it to comments to number 65. I just wanted to address some of the things that you were talking about. Yes, understanding the natural order of things, and understanding nature I think is profoundly important in today's world, especially in such a mechanistic world. Anyway, with that, thank you for that, for your comments, Curtis. Next up, I have, I believe, Margarita.
Yes, I want to talk about chapter 65.
Okay.
To my knowledge, we were talking about the reminiscence of the past as the source to get the profound virtue, where everything still seems very simple. Simple life is the source of profound virtue. But currently, we are living in a chaotic life that you require knowledge for living. But Tao say it was better in the past. So that's why the leaders should apply the principle of the past, that is like make everything simple. I just recently I watched this film, Good Place. Maybe you know, it's in the Netflix. I think I get it. I get this chapter while watching it. You see, previously maybe two centuries ago, if we can tell what is right and wrong easier, because everything much simpler. Don't kill, don't steal. That's probably the best way for you not to be involved in the law or violate any kind of rules. But now, if you buy fried chicken, you can support animal cruelty. If you buy banana, perhaps you're already supporting unfair trade. It's not easy to make decision because life is not as simple as the past. So perhaps it is true that the past provide us with clearer knowledge about how the nature should work, because everything is simpler. It's not that we against knowledge. I think we talked that in the previous chapter, but it's challenging now to live without knowledge. And what we can take from this chapter, perhaps we as the seller of chicken or seller of banana, or even the leaders of banana or chicken, maybe we should also try to make everything simpler, because Dao is quite direct. We just like to take this turn, like difficult ways just to get what we want. But actually the rule is quite simple. Just see the nature's way, nature's law. Thank you.
That was beautifully put. And I think that gets to Curtis's and Connie's question. So I really, and if we have time at the end, Curtis, we could even go into deeper to your question, because I think you brought up some very important points, and I would like to discuss them, but we'll see. Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Look like we have a lot of discussion on.
Yeah, we got to
65. Okay, just give a few things on this one. On the first paragraph, in the ancient time, those who were good at Tao didn't try to enlighten the people. They tried to keep them from knowing. It's difficult to rule people when they know too much. Sounds very good interpretation is from the Chinese legalism, Han Fei Zi interpretation. And in this Saturday, we were going to talk about Han Fei Zi. Han Fei Zi has the writing on his interpretation of Dao De Jing. So this is the one perfectly fit for the legalism interpretation, right? Don't let people know, just let them follow the rule, okay? If they let the people know too much, you are not going to, it will be difficult to rule your state. So that's a totally legalism interpretation. But Dao De Jing is a little bit more than that. If you read the second part, the ruler who governs the state with knowledge is like the thief of the state. The ruler who governs the state without knowledge is the blessing of the state. So in Taoism, especially Laozi's teaching, not only he wants the people, okay, the subjects, be ignorant, okay, be naive, and also want the ruler without knowledge on that. So you can see, forget about you agree or disagree, but that's the message here. Okay, if you only read the first line, you become the legalism, Chinese legalism. If you read the second line, you will get more on the Taoism point of view. That's the part I like to point out. And then I also like to go back to Curtis' comment on that. And then I fully understand what your point and what you are coming from. But just like last week in the Chinese philosophy meetup, one person mentioned about the Confucius teaching as naive. Okay, I totally understand the situation. That's just like to share how we read the ancient texts, right? When we read the Bible, Jesus said, turn your cheek. If you go to any place, I think you slap anybody, I don't think anybody will turn his or her cheeks to you. And we should consider this one as naive, but we still read this one as a teacher. I think that shows the attitude when we read the ancient texts, because they are telling something. If we want to put in the practice, it kind of naive, just like talking about the a large state stay low. And then we know nobody want to stay low. Not only the large state want to stay low, strong people don't want to stay low, talented people don't want to stay low. It's not practical at all. But I think the message is worth to think about. So I think that's personally, I like to read ancient texts because we will learn something, not word by word, but we will get the essence. For example, personally, I benefit a lot from these 3 sentences because to me, many times I face a large project. I don't know how to start, but I always remember these 3 lines. A giant tree of full-span girth grows from a tiny sprout. A tall terrace of 9 stories is built from a shovel of dirt. A long journey of 1,000 miles begins from a single footstep. Right? You want to run the marathon. The first thing you have to do is going out the door and start to run. Then you can finish. You have the possibility to finish. So when I face a huge project, the first thing I'm thinking is these 3 lines, because you need to make your hands dirty. Then you can start. Otherwise, I will sit there with a big picture, doing all the detailed planning, and probably you just delay for years and you never started. So I think these 3 lines is very beneficial to myself. So that's the only thing I like to share, and thank you.
Thank you, Jason. In the interest of time, we'll actually keep things moving along. We want to make sure we get through all these verses this evening. We'll start with verses 66, 67, and 68 next. So to read these verses, please type exclamation point in the chat. Evanique.
Chapter 66, River Sea. The River Sea is the king of all basins because it is good at staying low. Therefore, it is the king of all basins. For this reason, the sage, desiring to reign over the people, he speaks humbly. Desiring to lead the people, he stays behind them. Hence, the sage is positive above the people, but people don't feel burdened. He stays in front of the people, but people are not impaired. Hence, the world gladly esteem and never resent him, because he doesn't vie. The world cannot vie against him.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up, we have David. Or no, I'm sorry, it was Margarita, then David.
So it's me?
Yes.
Okay.
Apologies.
Chapter 67, The 3 Treasures. Everyone in the world says my Tao is too great to describe. It is only because of its greatness that is indescribable. If it were described, it would be insignificant after a while. I have 3 treasures: love, prudence, and dares, not to be the first of the world. Through love, one can have courage. Through prudence, one can reach widely. Through daring not to be the first in the world, one can take the lead. If one is courageous without love, reaches widely without prudence, rushes in front without being willing to stay behind, he is surely in danger. If one uses love to fight, he will win. To defend, he can guard strongly. When heaven wants to save someone, heaven will use love to protect him.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up, we have David.
Chapter 68, Not Vying. The good officers are not militaristic. The good warriors don't get angry. The good conquerors are not engaged in wars. The good managers stay in low positions. This is the virtue of not vying. This is the power of managing people. This is the ultimatum of complying with heaven.
Thank you, everyone. Now, please type an exclamation point in the chat to share what you got out of verses 66, 67, and 68. Margarita.
I think I will start with 67, the three jewels. I remember translating this because I use mustika, not permata. The idea is to show how very valuable these virtues are. And this is quite, this reminds me of the Greek philosophy of the importance of having virtue, so we can have good moral behavior. And I think this Chinese tradition also have this virtue that we need to be conscious about. We need to place that, cultivate that within us in order to follow Dao. And this is also a call to do reflection. What's yours? What are the virtues you have? What are the virtues that you need to cultivate? There are three main virtues: love, prudence, and daring not to be the first in the world. And if you follow this, you cultivate this virtue, you can obtain like closer to the Dao, the way of Dao. Yeah, thank you.
Beautifully put. I completely agree too. This is actually really captures, and I saw elements obviously of Stoicism in this. The idea that you're, having courage, prudence. I mean, those are two of the cardinal virtues. But love can also be seen as something with close to justice. And when you're speaking about it, it really calls out: if one is courageous without love, reaches widely without prudence, rushes in front of without being willing to stay behind, he is surely in danger. And I thought that really captured it beautifully, how that we need these things in order to live a good life, but to remain out of danger in the sense, and to stand up for ourselves, and to specifically with prudence, not to be gluttonous or take too much, or greed, and which was a major issue at that particular time. Is to only take what you need was a very important virtue to be able to practice. So that I appreciate those comments. Does anybody else have any comments on 66 or 68?
Next, guys.
Oh, please.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yes, I like the three treasure too, but I want to give this chapter, give three examples. Each chapter actually one example about Wu Wei. For this chapter, you see the Chinese code 不敢为天下先. Not dare be the first. So that's also you see the consistent. Why not from if it's 解? It's the love or and prudence, all about other people, not just yourself. So that's kind of, and to be, I'm not to be the first. I let other people, my team, or my country, my people, be the first. And that's about Wu Wei. The next chapter 68 is 是谓不争之德. This is the virtue of not vying. So that's this chapter value of not vying is virtue. You see, that's another way comparatively to competition is good. So our practice modern day, we don't value if who don't value competition, that means you lost the you lost, you get lost, and you cannot catch up. That's your fault. So here's this is virtue of not vying, right? And next chapter 69, also another way. 69, right? So 祸莫大于轻敌. Oh,
we haven't
We
read
haven't,
it.
we haven't read 69. I apologize.
67.
I think it's 66.
Oh,
in the TD.
66. Oh, the 66. Okay, I missed chapter 66. 66, last one. 以其不争, last two sentence. 以其不争, 故天下莫能与之争. Because he doesn't vie, the world cannot vie against him. This is kind of similar pattern for structural grammar, grammatically, like have you remember 无为 doing without doing with 无为. So here similar pattern. 以其不争 not vie. Therefore, nobody can vie with him against him. So that's how beautiful those kind of logic is internally. It's there's like they're thinking the way of the Dao De Jing thinking. This is so we lost kind, but it's also you think a bit deeper. Also makes sense. We practice that's another way. If like by the way about the knowledge itself, knowing is perspective based. How we look at. It's like number 6. If I look from, Joe, I see you, and you from 96, I was number 6. From your way looks, would it be number 9? That's the number. If you put a number 8 in between you and me, or similar. However, you put other number, maybe different way again. So that's so knowledge itself is going to, it's conditional based. Thank you.
Right. Great comments. And I really liked your comments on 68 with having caring leaders. And essentially, yes, I that is one of my favorite. You know, that not using force and as a way of ruling. That's not only in the principle of Wu Wei, but that is it's also a way of managing peace. And this is part of this is actually in Sun Tzu, the Art of War. Good managers stay in low positions that they understand actually the ground. So there's a lot to be gleaned from this particular verse, in my opinion. So next up we have Jody.
Yeah, hi all. So what I'm seeing here is not any different than what Indian scriptures dictate too. By laying low and humble, you get more out of life, out of people, out of situations, out of everything. So the mainstream over here I'm seeing is that you have to acquire equanimity in life, and you have to stay low. And don't try to outdo anybody, don't compare, don't compete. And that's not any different than what Gita is saying. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Jason.
Yeah, thank you. I think everybody catch the message of not vying, not competition, and I think that's very important on the whole 81 chapter, right? If you later on we will go to the last chapter. It's end with not vying. Okay, so I think that's other than Wu Wei, not vying. Wu Wei will be more on the stand for the ruler's point of view, right? You don't. When you do something, you do Wu Wei, but for the personal virtue is not vying. You don't compete. You just focus on whatever, small thing or yourself. And I think that's all this meaning here. Yeah, that's it. Let's move on.
Okay, thank you. So I'm assuming that you don't have comments, Madeline or Evanique, that you were typing exclamation point in the chat because you were offering to read, or are you just being volunteered here?
Joe, are you volunteering us?
Yes, Madeline, or was that your intention?
I did have a comment, but I'll read.
Okay. Let's hear Madeline and Evanique. Do you have brief comments?
Yeah, I did. I just want to say how very much I like the choice of the word vying. It's really a great word and seems to fit perfectly in these chapters. Also 66, the imagery was strikingly similar to the one about the big country and the small countries.
Yes.
That of something very large that has settled down into its proper place and is attracting smaller things. And for some reason, these are reminding me of, I don't know if anyone has read the novels of Liu Cixin, The Three Body Problem. At any rate, there are three very long novels, science fiction by a Chinese writer, they're contemporary. Aliens have come to Earth, we cannot see them, and they can hear everything that we say, everything that we write, and everything that we transmit electronically. And so the human race is faced with coming up with a way to counter them. And so what the rulers end up doing is choosing, I think it's 3 people, to be what they call wall facers. In other words, people who literally or metaphorically are just occupied with thinking through the problems. They're to be given anything they want. Any request is to be accommodated, and everyone is supposed to assume that they're coming up with a plan. They need to put all these things into place to implement it, but they can't say what that plan is. So I think, now that we're reading these again, I'm thinking of that and thinking, I'm wondering if that's where Liu, might be where he came up with that idea of the sage or the emperor who's kind of back behind the scenes, working on things at the very basic principles, and saying things or making requests that might not make sense to anyone at the time, kind of like the laying the ground of the Ooda Loop, or hanging back and daring not to be first.
Excellent comments. Excellent comments. Evanique.
Just a really quick one. When Jyoti was talking, she's talking about the Tao and the Gita and non-competition. I think there's also a confidence in knowing that you don't have to compete. Like if you're in a larger nation, you don't have to compete. And even if you're a smaller nation, you just want to participate. It's kind of like a nation knowing who they are, or if you go to an individual level, a person knowing who they are and knowing that they don't have to compete for anything.
Thank you. So if there are no other comments, we'll go on to numbers 69, 70, and 71. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to go ahead and to read verses 69. Thank you, Evanique.
Chapter 69, Military Strategy. The maxim of military strategy is, I dare not act as a host, but prefer to act as a guest. I dare not advance an inch, but prefer to retreat a foot. This is called marching without formation, pushing without arms, arming without weaponry, battling without enemies. There is no disaster greater than taking the enemy too lightly. Taking the enemy too lightly almost makes me lose my treasures. Therefore, when 2 evenly matched armies meet, the army that mourns shall win.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up, we have Margarita.
Chapter 70, Holding Jade. My teaching is easy to understand and easy to practice, but people throughout the world cannot understand or practice. My teaching has purposes. My work has principles. Few people understand me. Few people follow my teaching. For this reason, the sage wears plain clothes but holds jade inside.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up, we have 71, David.
Chapter 71, Flawless. Knowing but to believe it is unknown is merit. Not knowing but to believe it is known is a flaw. The sage is flawless because he recognizes his flaws as flaws. He recognizes his flaws as flaws. For this reason, he is flawless.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat, and I will be turning over moderation to the person who does it best.
Oh, I don't know about that. You're pretty good, Joe. All right, all right. So let's go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to comment, and then we will have Jason go last. Jason, you would like to go last, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You can choose to comment on either one or all of them, or all three of them, whatever you prefer. Try to keep your comments short because we want to get a sense of seeing all of them at once, all the way till 81. So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to talk about any of them. Go ahead. Nobody? Margarita, go ahead.
I love chapter 71. Previously, I mean, in other chapter, knowledge is more like scholarship. That is the one that Dao think that is like not according to the Dao. So we deny scholarship. But knowledge about oneself is very important because that is the way to be, to not go to wrongdoing. For this reason, only for those who know themselves, recognize the flaw, become flawless. That is also one important morale, I think, for personal development that people can read and also can give some kind of feeling of easiness. It's okay that you can do mistake, but you can learn from it. And yeah, that's just part of being human in this universe. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, 71 actually was one that I had noted as one of my favorites as well. I have it noted as someone that is unaware or lacks self-awareness is truly ill. And I also have the idea that you don't necessarily have this belief in a dogmatic system, that you know the absolute truth, that you're actually searching for truth, is a very important part of this. So there's an element of humility that goes into this particular passage as well. And it's also being comfortable with not knowing and uncertainty as well, as that I saw in there, that you know, the knowing what he does not know. And that takes an extreme amount of confidence. And that's a very important thing to possess, is the ability to say, I don't know, and deal with uncertainty. Those are just some of the notes that I have. Thank you.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Kevin, what about you? What do you think?
Thank you, Frank. Yes. Okay, let's base. You already pointed this chapter. Yes, I'm going to post my highlight. For me, also the code stage. 圣人 1, 2, third, second is the sage is flawless because he recognized his flaws as flaws. That's so like Joe mentioned that I know something I don't know. So they already know. So humble. That's it. We don't know. Like, see, if you got a boss, I know everything. So everything covered, your team. So that's listen to me. You can see the motivation, can see the leaders, the behavior. You see the people. That's got a problem. So here is 圣人不病，以其病病. That's about to say. They should be people look at Flores. Actually, he feel no. He recognize his fall. He know. He job big circle knowledge. He know more. And the more he find don't know. So that he don't know. The chapter 70. It's all very. I'm sorry to why here is like Jason mentioned one, last meeting make naive or something about that's sad as human self, even an individual. I'm going to read the last one. For this reason, the sage wears plain clothes, but holds the jade inside. It's how sad. That's a beautiful thing, but put to practice why we don't value it. So that's a question for ourselves. That's been we not value it. That mean we are right because we are modern. We are AI. We got electricity. We got everything. We go to put on in airspace. So that's too far. Eventually, we need to come back to look ourselves, return. Chapter last chapter.
69.
Yeah, 69. 69 is who about that's so practical even these days. I would say this day we have a war going on. Also, previous war, future never end. Here one suggestion for 祸莫大于轻敌. There is no disaster greater than taking the enemy too lightly. They also, if this one also connected, the three treasure, last treasure, right? Not the first place. So that seems not first place because you got your buffer, got your contingency. So look at it carefully. You look at the current war happen. We underestimate either side. If you're from the, I'm a little bit quickly over speech this one, particularly look at from the Soviet Union, Russia side, from the NATO, we have 5 times we expand. Original from belongs to the Soviet Union place, the country, now it belongs to NATO. So we take, so aggressive from another side, put on the corner, they feel. Can we have the news about Russia positive? No. Another side, the same thing happened. So we normally try to we Wi-Fi for our own benefit, compete for our own benefit until it's going to happen like this disaster. Then if I'm, it's a bit over speech about like one day, 1 week, the weapon is ported by a Western. They're going to use them all. So each one.
Let's not go too much into politics.
Okay, I know you hosted. Okay, yeah, that's because it's called military strategy. That's, by the way, I'm going to read it again. It's not who that disaster. Not it's about you take your enemy to light. For me, I would say don't treat your enemy as an enemy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I think there is an element to what Jason just said. The idea is not taking your enemy lightly, but to also, there's something deeper here, is to understand that war itself is failure. So that the idea that you're pushing forward you know, is something that it's something to be avoided at all costs, not necessarily something where you should be engaging, but rather one of the things that I'd read about this particular chapter was retreating is essentially essentially to a known territory. So as a way of actually where you're moving forward, you're actually moving into the unknown and you're engaging with the enemy. But the overall, you know, idea is that pushing forward and engaging in war, really nobody wins.
Thank you, Joe. Jason, can we look at number 71? This is definitely one of my favorites. Knowing but to believe it is unknown is merit. Knowing but to believe it is unknown is merit. Not knowing but to believe it is known is a flaw. The sage is flawless because he recognizes his flaws as flaws, knowing what he does not know. He recognizes his flaws as flaws, and for this reason, he is flawless. The thing I like about this is actually very, very fundamental of, you know, kind of the way in which it's like, I think Socrates says, you know, a person who doesn't know that he does not know is a fool. And that's the heart of sickness. And all you need to know is you don't know. Just recognizing that. And just that, simply saying, you know, simply that level of honesty. I think this is very profound. It's a very simple point, but very, very profound point. So I love it for that reason. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Since you like this word, so I'm going to speak more about the stage is looking for their flaws.
Yes.
So that's the second. It's another way. The normal people try hide flaws. Don't fight it. I'm going to only show off what I have. So that I'm going to quickly comment. Thank you.
Yeah. I like, I mean, it's basically kind of, you have to be sick of sickness. You know, you like, if you have a sense, because what happens for most people is that when the way you experience it is that at the edge of your consciousness, you have a sense, oh, maybe I don't know this. And many people's reaction is evasion, of trying to actually ignore that, because these things many times they don't hit you directly. They're kind of at the edge of your consciousness of saying something is wrong about what I believe. And the question is, do you turn towards it and look at it, or do you turn away from it and ignore it? So I think this is very profound. Next up is Jason. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I think 71, everybody like it. And I just like to mention, like, it's similar to like Socrates said in there's no life self, right? But sometimes we think it's easy, but I just remind it's not that easy, right? Try to think about your grandpa. Like, for example, like myself, I don't know how to dance. I don't know Greek. I don't know Russian. Okay, I don't know many things. I know it, but the problem is there's many things I don't know. I still don't know. For example, like my grandpa, he doesn't know computer. Okay, so I think so. That's many things. So we think we are smart enough, like Socrates, know thyself. I know what I don't know, but the problem is there's many things you don't know, but you still don't know because you have no clue. Okay, until when you become like great grandpa, then you say, oh, that's something I never heard about it. So I think that's not that easy. So let's go back to 70. I think the message here is hiding the jade. They're talking about you keep something inside and people not knowing. I think the message is not that difficult, but I'd like to talk a little bit more on this one, 69. Personally, I like this sentence, this paragraph: marching without forming, without formation, pushing without arms, army without weaponry, battery without enemies. I think this sentence is worth to contemplate, right? So when we talk about marching, when we talk about pushing, when we talk about arming, when we talk about battering, do we necessary to do with forming, armed, with weapon, with your enemy? I think that's, it is worth to think about it. So, and then it talk about the, if we take enemy lightly, you will lose the 3 treasures, right? Remember the 3 treasures in this chapter. And I think here we talk about 3 treasures, the courage, I'm sorry, the love, prudence, and dare not to be the first in the world. Think about this. That's very important message here. It try to balance, right? If you talk about courage without love, then you are in danger. If you talk about reach out, right, without prudence, you become, it's also make you in the dangerous situation. If you always want to stay in front, then you become too rush. So it's a balance, okay, a balance on the 2 ends. So I think that's why it's called the 3 treasure. It's kind of the balance on the other side. So that's what I like to mention on this 3 chapter.
Thank you, Jason. Who would like to read the next 3? Go ahead and type exclamation mark, please. Joe, you did not get to read anything so far. Go ahead.
You beat me to it. I was just typing exclamation point to everyone. So chapter 72, fearing the awe. If people fear not the awe-inspiring majesty, a great awful event may come. The ruler should not limit people's places. He should not oppress people's livelihoods. He does not oppress people. For this reason, he is not oppressed by people. Therefore, the sage is self-knowing, but not self-flaunting. He is self-caring, but not self-exalting. Indeed, he prefers the former, self-knowing, self-caring, to the latter, self-flaunting, self-exalting. I didn't know if you wanted me to read the parentheses, but.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Evanik, followed by David. Evanik.
Chapter 73, Heaven's Net. He, valiant enough to dare, will be killed. He, valiant enough to dare not, will live. These 2 can be beneficial or harmful. Who knows the reason one is detested by heaven? For this reason, even the sage treats it as a difficulty. The Tao of heaven, without vying, yet excels at writing, without speaking, yet excels at responding, without summoning, yet arrives spontaneously, is at ease, yet excels at strategizing. Heaven's net is vast. It is sparse meshed out, but nothing can slip through it.
Thank you, Evanik. Next up is David.
Chapter 74, The Great Executioner. If people no longer fear death, how can they be threatened by the punishment of death? If people are made to constantly fear death and they still act unruly, I can arrest and kill them. And who would dare to act unruly? The great executioner is usually in charge of killing. Those who killed for the great executioner are like whittlers compared to the master carpenter. Those whittlers compared to the master carpenter rarely don't hurt their own hands.
Thank you, David. Anybody who would like to comment on any of these three, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. We'll start with Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on chapter 73. Jason, can you go back up? So I remember we were talking about this in this mesh of the heavens net is vast, it's sparse method, but nothing can slip through it. And I remember this conversation, and I guess I still have a question about it, because I mean, heaven's net is vast, it is sparse meshed, but nothing can slip through it. So it's like you can let things in, but things don't go out. It's the way I'm interpreting it, but I don't know if that's correct. I think it's almost like, I don't know. I just have a question about it.
Let me answer your question. I believe that these first two sentences are very, first two, okay? It's very Chinese. If you know Chinese, it will be much easier to understand. When we say brave, courageous or bravery, right? In Chinese, we say 勇敢, two words, okay? Literally, these two words, the first word, I just try to translate as the 勇 and the 敢, okay? This word, okay? And this word. These two words combined together, in today's language, we call bravery, okay? But if you split these two words, the first word, 勇, first character, 勇, means valiant. That means you, let's talk about, that's one kind of virtue. And the second word, 敢, means daring, okay? So if you do it, you have this kind of intention, okay? But you dare to do it, okay? In Taoism teaching, it's dangerous. You should have this kind of virtue, this kind of vital in your heart, but you are willing to not do things, okay? For example, you see a kid drowning. So if you have the heart to save the kid, and you are daring, you probably jump in, but turn out the situation, you probably not saving the kids and you die also, okay? But if you know how to stop, okay, you probably will call people, try to get the tools, get the rod, okay, get a rope and tie yourself, then jump in to save the kids. So this kind of put a stop, this kind of thinking. That's, I believe, what they are talking about, this kind of a concept here. So I hope I answered your question, and then.
Thank you. Evanik, did you have, was that, did it answer your question?
No, but it was great. I think my part was just on that last part. Heaven's net is vast. It's sparse meshed, but nothing can slip through it. And I remember we had a whole conversation about it. So I'm sure other people have comments, so it's fine.
Sure.
But
What we'll do is when Jason comments, he will have one more chance of commenting on that. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Madeline. Joe.
So 72, which is the fearing the all. If people fear not the awe-inspiring majesty, a great awful event may come. The ruler should not limit the people, limit people's places. I mean, I think that there's a lot of elements of Wu Wei in this particular one, is that we should not rule by fear. And if you don't interfere with people's lives, that's, you know, that's perhaps the ideal. And it goes back to the idea of cooking the small fish. If you act unwisely, then people will fail to respect you as well. That's something that I have in this particular instance. But this is just really speaks to the idea of the concept of Wu Wei. Again, not oppressing people and not interfering with their lives.
Thank you, Joe. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I trying to see if I think I had something for 73, but I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'll let somebody else comment on that for now. Because Evanique's question was about the last two lines.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I have to try and remember actually.
Sure.
So forgive me.
Sure, no problem. Next up is Madeline.
Well, it seems as if, in a sense, the net question is answered by that first line about the people. Basically, the awe-inspiring thing and an awful event may occur, combined with the great executioner. It means that the things that we do here on Earth, we don't have to take everything upon ourselves to enforce the natural laws. We only need to enforce the human ones, because the enforcing natural law, that's going to happen anyway. And I think that the sparse net seems as if there's a lot of latitude. Oh yeah, now I'm remembering that conversation, Evanique. Okay, so imagine you're looking up at the stars and the constellations. Those could be seen as a type of net with huge spaces in between. But with Tian as the heavens, in other words, not just as the sky, but also as the kind of the yang order of things. All of the natural laws will be enforced anyway. And so when we get involved, we're like whittlers. We're not we necessarily little people like me, but the princelings and the sages and the rulers aren't really practicing Wu Wei in the same way that a master carpenter is. And so that what seems like a very big net where you can just wiggle through with everything will turn out, it's like that quotation, it's like, what is it, the one about the wheels of heaven grinding slowly but exceedingly fine? The concept of a mill wheel turning slowly, but everything gets ground through it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, from chapter 72. It's talk the last. Therefore, the sage is self-knowing, but not self-floating. He is self-caring, but not self-exalting. It's here's like these three chapters. I'm not sure from chapter. It's all war related or more than a vying competition. So here's talk with the people and the ruler. For me, obviously, you can modern days more complex. For example, I know you don't like use example. For example, one country leader, they got 80% approval. Another country leader got also 90% approval. So that's again the case is complicated. See, however, if you leader, you consider leader as a sage, you have to self-knowing and caring yourself and your people, your country. That's for chapter 72. 73 is 贴之道不争而赛胜. But can you highlight 贴之道? Jason, thank you. By this law, the Dao, about the Dao, by this word, so commonplace. By the way, I'm going to share one side story. In Japanese, the writing is different for Dao. Dao De Jing. However, the code exactly pronouncing exactly same. If you talk to one Japanese, Dao De Jing, or they already get it. Normally, the Japanese, they try separate the culture a little bit different Chinese. They different writing, but the meaning is the same. Lots of Dao De Jing's words, you see the Japanese actually they have similar knowledge, 知道. Anyway, for Dao, for example, Dao is so popular. For example, 识道, I've got an English word for organs, lots about the Dao, the system self. Anyway, here's like 天之道不争而善胜. Back to here, without vying yet excel at winning. That's another is 无为, but it's better than we. Or we do wu wei, but we doing something without effort. We are still winning. By the last two sentences, another idiom in Chinese, 天网恢恢，疏而不漏. It's like Madeline said. It's a sky of net. It's vast. If we human beings solve, we can solve. They still have some in Dao. We don't know, or they can help us to deal with. Chapter 74. Last is very interesting. 细有不伤其手也. Those, but eventually, whoever you doing something can make the war competition. Eventually, you hurt yourself. So that's very interesting. They also, I'm not sure I would ask Jason question about why they compare the executor to the carpenter. So that's like, it's for me, right? I want an interpretation. Like if I help somebody killing something, you hurt yourself. This one idiom, I'm not sure in English how you move big stone, you hurt yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have Jason answer all the questions all at once at the end. So feel free to ask more questions to Jason. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Margarita. Joe.
I'll be really brief because I know that we want to get to 81 by 11 o'clock. I know Jason wants to keep on track, but I do remember 74 now. And this is the idea of the great executioner and us stepping into nature's role as the executioner, and the idea that that would be obviously against nature, and that was against the Tao and against the way. So, you know, that the great carpenter, that essentially nature is ultimately the arbiter of you know, of someone's life. So that was something that I remembered from 74, and I roughly remember now what Madeline was mentioning about 73 now as well. So
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is Margarita, followed by Jason. Margarita.
Yes, about the sparse mass net. I think I just checked my notes. It's almost similar like the not filled cup or jar or door or window. So the empty space give function. It's saying something about providing or allowing the rule of the heaven to exist rather than reacting or trying. So it's also similar with Wu Wei. And with the 74 about the death, it's quite interesting because to me, this is the time where death is introduced as something unnatural, because death should be natural. Why can death be unnatural by these unskillful leaders? Perhaps this is more about to remind these young leaders not to be, you need to be careful about other people's life, because unnatural death is not according to the Tao. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Jason.
Yeah, I think let me first to answer or respond to what Kevin talked about, why you compare the executioner and the carpenter. This one is a controversial. Okay, but I take the so-called Su Ce's interpretation. He considered the great executioner is the heaven. So that means if somebody did something bad, the heaven will punish the person. And why you, as a ruler, as a governor, why you do it? Just like, you know, you do the master carpenter's job, you know, because you are not capable to do it, so you may hurt yourself. So I think that's one of the interpretation. But of course, you can consider as a more legalism interpretation, right? You can consider have somebody do it. As a ruler, you don't do it. You have your outsource your job, okay, the killing job for other people to do it. You are as a ruler, you don't do it. Okay, keep your hand clean. That very Machiavellian or very Chinese legalism thinking. So that's another way to look at this one. This one, sorry, I didn't point to directly respond to Evanik's question. This 73, I think Margarita answered it. So if you tie everything together, you look at this one, basically talk about bravery, right? And you don't have to rush to dare to do many things, because a lot of things will be taken care of by the natural law, because that's whatever Tao, whatever heaven is doing is totally unpredictable. So to the end, it's talking about the Tao of the heaven, just like a net, which is vast but sparse meshed. But you still cannot go through, okay? You still cannot go through. So in the legalism interpretation will be a little bit different, okay? They will consider the heaven's net is like a law. The law doesn't cover every single thing, but you don't think about you can escape it, right? The meshes has a hole, but you know, just like the law, they have the loophole here, but don't think about you can get through it. So there's a many way to interpret this one. I just provide the two way. One is Taoism thinking, one is legalism thinking. Even most of people think that's totally opposite, but they have overlap in some point. So that's the interest part, and probably also my personal interest. And then I think this one, most of people talking about this one. I think I will skip this one already. So let's move on.
Sure. So Jason, you need to leave at 11 o'clock, right? We've got
a few minutes, that'll be fine. I just don't want last for like
sure.
60 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so then let's do one thing. Let's then now go from 75 all the way till 81, and then we will do comments all together. All right, so go ahead and type exclamation mark in order to read. I will start with Joe, followed by Margarita. Joe with 75, go ahead.
Probably helps if I unmute. Chapter 75, value living. The starvation of the people is caused by excessive taxation from their ruler. So they are hungry. The unruliness of the people is caused by the interference from their ruler. So they are unruly. The disregarded of death by the people is caused by the obsession for excessive living from their ruler. So they are death disregarding. Only those who don't work solely for their own living are better than those who value their lives too highly.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Margarita, Evanik, and David. Margarita.
Chapter 76, Soft and Tender. When people are alive, their bodies are soft and tender. When they are dead, their bodies become hard and tough. When they are alive, grass and wood, they are soft and delicate. When they are dead, they become withered and dry. Therefore, that which is hard and unbending follows death. That which is soft and tender follows life. For the same reason, the unbending army cannot win. The unbending wood can be broken off. The large and unbending are a low position. The soft and tender, a high position.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Evanik.
Chapter 77, the Tao of Heaven. The Tao of Heaven is like drawing a bow, lowering that which is high, raising that which is low, decreasing what is excessive, filling what is deficient. Sorry. The Tao of Heaven decreases and excess fills the deficiency. The Tao of people is not the same. It decreases the deficiency and supply to the excess. Who can supply the excess to the world? Only those who have the Tao. Therefore, the sage works without flaunting, achieves without taking credit. He doesn't want to bear the name of excellence. He doesn't want to bear the exalted name.
Thank you, Evanik. Next up is David.
Chapter 78, the virtue of water. Nothing in the world is more tender nor soft than water, but nothing attacks what is hard and stronger better than water does. There is nothing that can replace water. Tenderness can overcome strength. Softness can overcome hardness. Nobody in the world doesn't know this, yet nobody acts on this. Therefore, the sage said, those who receive the disgrace of the state can be the lord of the country. Those who receive the misfortune of the state can be king of the world. The truth seems opposite to the spoken words.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Margarita. Joe.
Chapter 79, Contract Receipt. After settling a major complaint, there must be remaining complaints. How can this be good? Therefore, the sage holds the left side of the contract, but doesn't demand payment. Those with virtues keep contracts. Those without virtues collect payments. The Tao of Heaven is impartial. It always accords with the good people.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Margarita, followed by David. Margarita.
Chapter 80, Not Migrating. In a small state with few people, let people have many tools, but they don't need to use them. Let people worry about that so they don't migrate to distant places. There are boats and carriages, but people don't ride on them. There are weapons and armors, but people don't display them. Let people refer to the ancient way of tying knots. Let them taste their food, admire their clothes, settle in their homes, entertain their customs. The neighboring states overlook one another. The crowing of rooster and the barking of dogs can be heard from one another. Throughout their lives, people have no comings and goings with one another.
Thank you, Margarita. Last, David.
Chapter 81, not hoarding. Trustworthy words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not trustworthy. Good people are not eloquent. Eloquent people are not good. The wise are not erudite. The erudite are not wise. The sage doesn't hoard. The more he works for others, the more he possesses. The more he gives to others, the more he earns. The Tao of Heaven is to benefit, not to harm. The Tao of the sage is to act, not to vie.
Thank you. Folks, if you'd like to comment on any of these, please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Start with Joe.
So there's a lot here, but let's just start with 75. This I remember because how excessive taxation actually could lead to hunger, because it was actually food that was taxed at that particular moment in time. So that was something that I had and that also the second thing that to consider is to, again, the major problem is, the more you interfere, the worse things can be. So that's so this speaks again to, which we've seen reoccurringly here, is the importance of non-action, not interfering with people's lives when you shouldn't. So I think that's it for 75. You can go to 76 and see if I remember really quickly. Give me a second. Let me
Sure.
give me a second. I have to think. I have to
Sure.
remember some of these.
No problem. Margarita.
Yeah, after rereading this chapter 75, I think this is very relevant in our current days, because life has become more difficult, especially with the financial situation in all over the world. The increase of prices, some people find it difficult to pay taxes probably. So I think this is also a good reminder for us to live right now, that how to not to interfere, but also not to make people's life become more miserable because of us. And chapter 76, I think it's about the main agenda is about not to do violence. I really I agree with this. The unbending is as underlines the importance of attitudes against violence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I really like numbers 76 and 78, and I see so many commonalities between them. So the idea that, life is soft and tender, and that water, nothing in the world is as soft as water, so this, it's the same. I see it as the same point of being responsive, flowing with the Tao very naturally, and that gives it tremendous power. It seems very weak, compared to stone, but it makes the Grand Canyon. That's its power. So I thought, I think these two are some of my favorites. Now, let's see. I know that Jason needs to go soon. Jason, what comments would you like to make?
Well, I just have to say thank you, everyone, and just accompany me to read through all this one, and kind of force me to think very hard on every single word. I just have to say thank you, thank you, thank you. My teacher, my parents, nobody can force me to this kind of work, but you guys make it. So actually, I benefit a lot. And I look around the people, including the college professor. I'm not sure, are they really reading in the way I'm reading? So, I'm very proud of this one. And I just want to share with my experience, just like I said many, many times, I read when I was young. And the reason I pick up this book is because I hate Confucian teaching, which is orthodoxy in the school. They force me to memorize. So I have to read something opposite than Confucius teaching. So after I read it, and then when I grown, I find out it's probably not useful, not practical, just like many people said, not very practical. So I kind of forget about it. And then when I know more people, I start to realize, this kind of teaching has been branded in my blood. So my behavior be a little bit different, being influenced on this. So I start to read this one again, and then understand, how do we treat the ancient text, right? You don't take it literally and do what they said, just keep people ignorant. Don't teach your kids, keep your kids no knowledge. And that would be easy to control your kids. Yeah, that's true, but you don't want to do it. But a lot of things, they have their meaning on that. So just read again and again and remind it. And then we are going to have analytics read it. I think that will be very beneficial because we are reading the opposite side of teaching. And one day you will see, probably you will see the same theme and the same problem they try to resolve, but they take a totally different approach. But during the opposite approach, you probably also see their common method they are trying to reach. They all praise Dao. Okay, so I think that's the interest part. And if you can read both, I think that would be wonderful. And I would say to understand Asian culture, not only Chinese, Japan, Korean, Vietnam. Okay, probably that's I believe Margarita will agree. Probably Indonesia have some influence on this. So and just have to say thank you everyone. And I'm happy to learn everything. And I hope this one we will go on and on. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I have several things, and I want to give a chance for Joe to say it and anybody else who wants to say it. I mean, this has been amazing. So folks, any feedback for Jason? And I really like Jason's comment that nobody could make him do this, that we made him do it. So we have to be very proud of ourselves that we got Jason to do this. And what happens is that it's a question of community. What happens is that when so many people are really deeply engaged with whatever you're doing, I find it myself, whenever I'm doing anything for this community, that the feedback that you get, the rich feedback, is very motivating to keep going. And I think, Jason did such an amazing job. And what happens is that I really feel sad about these great texts, that nobody really engages them the way in which they should be engaged. So I'm seeing that in Dao De Jing, I'm seeing that in Bhagavad Gita, I'm seeing that in the Gospel of John. And it just brings out so much richness and so much power, which is there in the book. And it's kind of, we are tapping into that. And one of the wonderful things that is happening is that we are able to now see connections between them. So any comments that anybody has on the translations? We're going to go with Joe, followed by Margarita. Joe.
I just, I want to say thank you to Jason as well. I mean, it's really been an honor to have you do this each week and to know how challenging that these translations are, to be able to get the contextual knowledge, the words that help express what was meant at that particular time in history, so that we can understand it ourselves. Seeing you and Aman work together, it's a privilege, and it's something that a lot of people in universities across the country, they don't have that opportunity. And we've had that opportunity here with you every Tuesday night for free. And we understand how busy you are. You also run your own meetup on Saturdays and put together a very long presentation. So, it's been an honor, and it's just the Tao has been one of those things that has been one of the most important things over the past couple of years for me. It's, working with you is, I always said this, Tuesday night was the night of the week that I actually really looked forward to. So
it's one of the reasons is that it has a really good moderator,
it was just a peaceful meetup. It was just, you just felt a lot better walking away.
Yes, absolutely. Next up is going to be Margarita, followed by Evanik. Margarita.
Yes, I also want to extend my gratitude. Thank you so much for 52 Living Ideas, the learning community that facilitate Jason and push Jason to do this, that I can also learn, take the benefit of this learning situation. Thank you. And this is very precious, this community that love learning, all texts. So please continue the job because there's good alternative. And the second thing I also want to say, a good news actually from Indonesia, from my perspective, even though there's this the rise of conservatism in my country, that's the mainstream. However, it's also create a fluctuation of they want to know other things beyond this mainstream conservatism. So actually, Jason, some young people in my country start to learn Dao De Jing. So let's continue this work, including the analects, to provide them with alternative, not only with the one-sided story of conservatism or their so belief into their own thing. There are other important stuff. And Indonesia, actually Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, they share a temple. So that, I think that's similar what we just said. They kind of have this link together. We call it here three temples, and here in Indonesia, three temples. So Taoist, Confucianism, and Buddhist, they can go to the same temple and pray together, which is beautiful. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. I particularly like the combination that Jason has of kind of very focused kind of scholarly understanding of things. At the same time, he's very open to what other people are saying, and he's genuinely curious about what are these other people saying. Okay, and that's usually you don't get that combination, and that's actually the most rewarding combination for anybody who's listening to somebody like Jason, because he has both those things. And I think that as a result of it, Dao has a capacity of really transforming lives. And I think many people are walking away with some element of it in their hearts, thanks to whatever you've done. And we really look forward to doing the same thing with Confucianism. I know you've tried to plug it by saying it's very boring and you hated doing it, but all of that aside, I think that it's going to be amazing because it's a crucial piece. Again, it's like one of the great works, and really looking forward to that. Next up is Evanik.
Yeah, Jason, I just wanted to express my gratitude to you for putting in all of this work. You've basically introduced me to the Tao, and I mean, it was a great introduction to the Tao because you taught the history. You also, you tried so much. I appreciate that you tried so much to stay true to the authentic Chinese translation and tried to stick as much to the original text as possible. And, the historical aspect is just amazing. And I love that you are able to accept feedback from other people that know how to translate the Tao from China, like that understand Chinese, and you incorporate it into your translation. So I think like you allowing that in is just an amazing quality. You don't claim to be right all the time. You accept correction. So I love that. It's been a fulfilling, oh my gosh, I don't even know how long. I know it's been over a year. But I appreciate you and Amon, but especially you, like you gave us so much depth for this text and you made it easily accessible and practical. And, thank you for answering our questions. Thank you for staying on late, and thank you for working through it with us, even when we didn't completely get it. You would stick with us and not try to just move on. So I appreciate that. Like, you are a teacher and a scholar. So for all that, I say thank you very much.
And folks, I encourage you to join us for looking at Confucianism. Actually, the way I approached all of these works, including Gospel of John, including Bhagavad Gita, including Dao De Jing, is to first listen to it. That's the easiest way, because you can kind of let it flow over you, so you don't get into minutia. You try to see pattern of what Confucius is trying to say to you. So there are lots of recordings available on YouTube. So you can look up anything. It's not as poetic as Dao De Jing. So the translation is not that critical. That's my impression. There are many translations which are very good. So you can pick many different translations and listen to it. I would recommend start listening to it now. I've just went through it. I just finished it yesterday. It took me, I think it is the one I had was about 3.5 hours. So I listened to it over the last week or two. And I strongly recommend that, just listening to it and then participating in it, because as Jason is saying, this is the other part of the Chinese culture. It's like the yang part to yin, if you will. And you can't really understand the Chinese culture and its base without having both these. So really, next up is going to be Elena. Elena, go ahead.
Yes, and Jason, yeah, it was tremendous work that you've done. Just it's so much focus and consistency, and just I really appreciate that. And so just asking you a question, if you have to say within a sentence what's Dao De Jing and Dao for you now after doing so much work, what is it?
Well, if you look at me, what I'm doing, I try to follow Dao. So I accept everybody's good word to me. I very appreciate you guys take the comment, and I'm not because that's a good comment, because the comment is means I have been following Dao. I accept the criticism. I never take the ownership, and then I try to stay. I hope I'm humble enough, but basics, that's the way. So that's why I'm very happy at this situation. And Shrinkan can read analytics in 3.5 hours. But I'd like to ask a question and keep in your mind. For 2,000, or that's 2,000, at least 1,000 years, 1,300 years, a Chinese scholar, they spend a lifetime to study this one. So Shrinkan can finish in 3.5 hours. So let's think about what's the difference between Shrinkan's understanding and the traditional Chinese scholars' understanding of the Confucius analytic. So
to put it in the Dao terms, that Confucius analytics flow through me, just like water flows through me.
Okay.
And this is like but the water keeps flowing, and the more it flows, that's his nature. It'll keep flowing. So the way I approach it is that I just listen to it. I just listen to it to see patterns, and I have to listen to it multiple times. Each time I get only so much, and you kind of have to accept that, and patterns slowly emerge. So that's kind of my style of learning all of these works, because they are so different from what you're used to that many times it is easier to try to get the whole multiple times instead of trying to kind of dive in deep. So that's just my style of learning. And that's
the point I'd like to say is I believe the learning analytics will be a totally different way of learning. Okay, it could be different, and I still don't know what's the best way or what kind of approach I will take. So that's the very big difference. I probably just finish in 3 hours. It could be possible. Probably I just stuck in the one sentence for 3 days. We don't know, but right. I'm willing to do it. And I believe I will keep the same attitude, and I will expect everybody who knows Chinese, who doesn't know Chinese, or here they're totally out of knowing nothing about this, and give the comment and give me your thought. I think that's all important, to at least to me. And I believe, just like Margarita said, we probably changing the world, step by step. Just remember, the 1,000 miles started from first step. we are making from the first step, and probably our impact is humongous. We don't know, you know.
No, great point. Great point. Next up is Kevin. I also want to express my gratitude towards Kevin, because he has been coming consistently, and all the, you know, he's looking at the characters, he's talking about the characters. So Kevin, really appreciate your, you know, your participation. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Just now you mentioned Jason, you know, take a dedicated time. For me, I know a Chinese character. I kind of saw Jason deeply understand something. Actually, spend time, like, you know, compare them, different philosophy, Western and traditional to some years. It's amazing. That's why I learn every time you know me. I excited to attend your meetup and learn a lot. Then inspire me speaking and inspire my thought. So it's Joe's, you know, you're fabulous, and your knowledge about other Stoic, you know, help us, you know, understand this. And Avnik, yourself about connecting about Christianity. That's great, you know, hear your translation. And Margarita, you about Bahasa. I tried hear it, but you also narrow down those each word translation pinpoint. That's great. So, yeah, I would see Madeline not here. Yeah, she is great too. So everyone else, it's just like Shrenka said, we Jason not a sage, but he tried to be look for his followers, different opinions. He value that. He excited by it, not hide something. Okay, that's something. That's my law. That's my lecture or something. It's beautiful here. It's everything created by you, Shrinka and 52 Lima idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. I mean, this point is very critical. You know, it's like each person here brings so much to the table. You know, each person, like Margarita, Evanik, you know, Greg, Elena, Marco, everybody. And what happens, Kevin? I mean, each person brings so much, and that's what it's you know, rich is. But I want to thank Joe. You know, Joe has done such a, you know, and Joe, I think you are a very good Taoist moderator. So it is, you know, it's I like your very much like your moderating style, and I think you've added so much to this. And it's a very big thing for people who are producing content like Jason, because what it does is that he can just focus on content and he can let you handle all the moderating. So it makes his job a lot easier. You know, he can focus on saying, okay, what are people saying? Let me try to understand it instead of trying to manage everything. So I think this kind of pairing of moderating, and I strongly recommend for Confucianism, we don't switch. You don't try to learn and translate.
I know.
And I don't think it's a good idea for Jason to be doing moderating. I think you're better at it. So we'll continue with the same format, and I think it'll work very well. So Jason, if you have 2-3 minutes, okay. I can tell you.
Yeah, I probably need to go. Yeah, and but
sure.
Joe, thank you. You know, I think you should be the professional moderator. You know.
Thank you. Jason.
When I see your face, I feel more comfortable. Even in my
that means the world. That means the world.
Even in my Asian philosophy meetup, you know, when we have a hacking, then I just hand over to Joe, make Joe as a co-host, and then he will take care of that.
Yes.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I got to go, and then see you next time. You know.
Thank you, folks. So what we're going to do next time, we have got 1 week where, because we're going to start Confucian Analects in 2 weeks' time. So next week, please, it's going to be, the topic is going to be your favorite verse. So you bring your favorite verse and you read the favorite verse and talk about what you got from it. So that's what we're going to do next time. Right, Joe?
That's right. I'm looking forward to that, actually. I'm looking forward to hearing you.
Yes.
I know which one. I know which one you're gonna choose.
I don't know. It's like,
You could choose one that maybe isn't your favorite since you know 25 so well.
No, see what I did was this, like when I first read, Ursula Le Guin is what I used, right? So I have all these, I don't know whether you can see it. So I have it all marked, and I have all my favorite ones marked with a dot. So I know exactly which ones are my favorite, and I have named all of them. So I have kind of different names for all the 81 verses. And so I look forward to that. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. All right. See you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.